Hello everybody and welcome to another edition of Live from the Archive. My name is Tom Ferber, and I'm an Engagement Learning Officer here at London Metropolitan Archives. I'm currently in our newly launched exhibition, Magnificent Maps of London, which, as the name suggests, shows off some of the wonderful maps we have in our collection. You'll be able to see these maps if you are able to make it to the exhibition in person, both in the original form. We have some maps in original form on display in cases, and indeed the map behind me is an original map as well. And we're also supplementing that with maps in digital replicas of maps reproduced in various other formats as well. But today we're looking at a map that's an original format. We're looking at a manuscript map from 1618. Manuscript map is simply the jargon we use to say a map that's been handmade. So it's a very rare map dating back to 1618. Because it's on display in a case, and actually because there's lots of lights and glare, I'm not going to show you the map itself from the exhibition space. I'm going to go back upstairs to my desk and I'm going to show you the map on the screen there. So I'll be join you again in a moment's time.
So I'm back at my desk now, and on your screen you will see the map in question that we're looking at today. So as I mentioned, this is a Plan of Bankside from 1618. I'll also mention that I've put a link in the video description. That's a link to the London Picture Archive where you can see this image. The London Picture Archive is our online image database. You can see today's map there and around a quarter of a million other images of London for you to browse and to look at and enjoy. So if after this talk's finished, you want to spend a bit more time with this map, that's probably the best place to do it. Okay, so what can we see here? So this is a plan of the Bankside area. So Bankside is around the River Thames, and that's what we can see on this map. The first thing to say about this map that's a little bit unusual is that it's not orientated in the way that we have become used to with maps. So at the top of this map is the west, at the bottom of this map is the east, and therefore it follows at the right of this map is the north, and the left of this map is the south. We're of course used to maps facing north. Now, it's not, of course, entirely unique for maps to face different directions serving on their purposes, and indeed the very term orientation gives us a clue that there's no fixed way to show a map, because the word orientation of a map is etymologically linked to the orient, as in the east, and older maps would face east because they were facing the Holy Land. Just a little bit of information there on the origin of that map term. So this is a map that's orientated north. What else can we say about this map by way of opening remarks? Well, I should give you a little bit of information about its materiality, I suppose, or what it's made of. So it's made of parchment, and it's around 60 centimeters wide. Parchment is a form of animal skin, and this animal skin is used as a writing material. The writing material used would be ink, originally iron gall ink. Now we can't be sure, but we do suspect, for reasons I'll go into in a little bit of time, that this map has been conserved later on, and so the ink that we see might not be original, something we might investigate at some point. So originally this had been made with iron gall ink, although we have our suspicions that it's not the case now. And then its coloured inks or washes have been used to show the Thames and the various boundaries and demarcations on this map. I'm not sure, but I suspect as well that the River Thames might originally have been blue and has faded to this green colour. That does happen. We can see on the right hand side, we can see some blue peeping through there. So I suspect that it may have faded from blue to green. We do see that, something that happens, or it might be that green was used originally as well. The convention of using blue for water, as natural as it seems today, is just that convention that's developed over time. And this arrangement, these colours, this format would be fairly typical for something like this. So we would put this in the broader category of an estate plan. An estate plan is a type of map that is used, as the name suggests, to plan out an estate. So there's a strong link there with ownership, with property ownership, demarcation of land, of territory, and indeed in a moment's time we'll hear that that's the origin story of this map. Because it's an estate plan, these are often unique, so there's only one of them. You'll often hear these maps called archival, as in there's just one rather than being a printed reproduction. And we'd also call this map a a manuscript map, that is a handmade map, as opposed to a map such as the one that was behind me on the introduction, which is a printed map. Actually, that, as it happens, that map is very rare. There's only 3 in existence, but it was a map that was relatively speaking, mass produced, or certainly replicated in hundreds originally, rather than unique like this. So we would make the distinction between a printed map such as that and a manuscript or a handmade map such as this. So we've heard that this is an estate plan, and we've also heard that estate plans relate to the demarcation of land ownership and of property. And of course, one of the reasons that sometimes you need to have a demarcation of your property is in the case of a dispute over who owns what rights of way and that sort of thing. And that's exactly the case for this map. So the origin of this map is actually a dispute over a right of way between the City of London and the Borough of Southwark. But before we go into the details of that dispute, I should just tell you a little bit more about the history of this document itself, because archival documents have a habit of, I'm not going to say getting lost, because that would cast aspersions on my colleagues in records management, repository management, which I do not want to do, knowing how hard they work and how well they work. So it's not that documents get lost, but they have a habit of sort of lying dormant. They have a habit of, much like a wizard that's never early or late, arriving exactly when it wants to, they have a habit of sort of fading from view. We know sort of where they are, but we sometimes forget about their relevance until we have reason to go back over them, to sort of bring them out again and to find out a little bit more about them. And that's exactly the case that happened with this document. So there's a charming little section in the volume 22 of the Survey of London. The Survey of London is a very long-running multi-volume of history which documents the history of the buildings of London, kind of past and present. And in the appendix of the, say, volume 22 of this survey, which was published in 1950, this map gets a special mention. And what we hear is that the map and the phrase they use was most opportunely found in the City Comptroller's office at Guildhall. So I'm not quite sure what had happened that meant it wasn't found before. It might have been the way that it was catalogued. It might indeed have only just recently come to the Guildhall. At that point, we don't actually have records that tell us that. But what we do know, though, is this map lay dormant for literally centuries and then arrived at that time. As well as sort of lying dormant in one of the storerooms and strong rooms over at Guildhall, it also had a narrow brush with destruction, because it was damaged by a bomb during the Second World War. So it was severely water damaged during the Second World War, and as we suspect has been restored since. Indeed, we're not entirely sure as a result of that whether the writing is original or not, as I alluded to a moment ago. So the map was rediscovered when they were making volume 22 of the Survey of London, and the then deputy keeper of the City of London records was able to piece together the information about a court case which led to the map being made in the first place. What we hear is a very interesting story, really a trade or customs dispute between the City of London and the Borough of Southwark, and in particular between some of the publicans belonging to the respective parties. So it's really worth just me telling you what you can see on this map. So we know this is the south bank of the Thames along here. Well, this is the road to London Bridge along here. It's that's what that writing would say. It's obviously a bit small to read here, the road to London Bridge. We have to remember that in 1920, when this dispute was going on, that London Bridge was the only way into the City of London. People would, and if you were arriving, and the bridge and the wall, the gates in the City of London would close at night. So it was very, very common for people who travelled from the south into London, who were then going to travel back, back to the south, to stay in accommodation, pubs, taverns, and the like along the Bankside. Also, there was less less restrictions on what you could and couldn't do in this part of town at this time. So Southwark, the area south of the river, the borough of Southwark, had a certain reputation for licentiousness and and entertainment that sort of made it very famous as well. So this is where you tended to want to stay if you could, and so lots of pubs and taverns and the like sprung up along here. Now the dispute is between the the proprietors of hospitality on the way into London Bridge and the proprietors of new hospitality over here. So this would say the Cat and the Falcon. So what these proprietors have done is they've opened up a new right of way along here across this park, the Bishop of Winchester's Park, and they are basically diverting custom along this new shortcut. It's coming along here, through here, and then coming along here. And the existing publicans along here, who, although technically are in the City of London, they're tenants of land belonging to the City of London, it's getting a little bit confusing, are claiming that this is an illegal right of way and that these people here are therefore illegally stealing their custom. And the matter goes to court, and effectively it's a court case between the City of London, the Bridge Estate as part of the City of London, and the Borough of Westminster to settle this dispute in court. And if we zoom in, we can see that as this case goes to the Court of Aldermen in March 1618. And as the case is ongoing, a chain is actually put over this gate. So you can perhaps just about read there that says the chain gate, and this says the way which is in question in that old archaic spelling, way spelled W-A-I-E. And here it says the 3 roads in question as well. So this is the disputed area, and a chain is put across it so that people can't travel across it as the court case is ongoing. The court case runs until November 1620, so it's a long running court case, of which the city eventually loses. So they lose the court case, so the right of way can stay open, and the people in the borough of Southwark are therefore vindicated. And then this map is produced following that court case. We know that the land is surveyed by one Mr. Where it's variously spelled Rathbone or Ratspur in the court documents, and this map was produced by Mr. Rathbone, Ratspur, to record effectively the dispute and effectively to record the judgment as well. So this is the origin of this map, as we heard. Estate plans are often important in this sort of manner, either show the territory that you do have or some kind of legal record that you can have. So they're important. One of the things that I find particularly interesting about working with archives, and it's a really important thing to bear in mind when we work with them in various different ways, is that archives are often made for one purpose. They're made to solve one problem for someone, and then they can be used later on by historians and people and anyone in history and doing their research, solve different problems and puzzles later on. And that was very much the case with this map, that it was made, as we heard, to settle disputes, a very real business dispute between publicans in the 1610s. But later on, it solved a dispute between historians a dispute that ran basically 300 years later. So in the first half of the 20th century, there was a big argument about exactly where Shakespeare's Globe's Theatre was located. So the fact that it was located on the south bank of the Thames was not disputed, but exactly where it was in relation to Maiden Lane was disputed, and there was a series of pamphlets arguing to and from published in the 1920s and onwards. And as I understand it, as is sometimes the way with academics, they got quite strongly worded in that way that academics do, quite passions running high, disguised behind eloquent and sometimes extended verbiage. And the dispute basically centered around the location of the globe, north or south of Maiden Lane. And as we heard, this map faded from view until it was rediscovered in the 1950s, and in doing so, I think it's right in saying effectively settled that debate once and for all, showing the position of the globe as south of Maiden Lane. So a bit of a footnote there, but it does show, I think, this nice thing how archives can be used in ways far different than their original producers intended. I doubt the litigants in this court case, I doubt the land surveyor and map maker, Mr. Rathburn, expected people to be so passionately concerned about the location of the Globe Theatre 300 years later, but nevertheless, their work solved that dispute. So I hope you've enjoyed hearing a little bit more about this manuscript map currently on display in Magnificent Maps of London. If you are able to come in person, you can come and see the exhibition anytime the archive is open, which is currently Monday to Thursday, 10 until 4, and we're open now. We'll be having late night openings shortly on a Wednesday until 6 p.m. So you can come and see us that if you're able to. But if for every reason, primarily for geography, if you can't come and see us in person, please do keep coming along to the Live from the Archive events. We'll be back on the 10th of May looking at Ogleby and Morgan's map of London following the Great Fire. I hope to see some of you then. Thank you again.